Testing. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes. I know we're a couple minutes early today, but we were having a chat, and I thought it'd be fun to have it on air.
Sure. I think the conversation is evolving very organically.
It is. So we were talking about your cats, and then the question came up about what qualifies a person as a cat lady.
Mm-hmm.
So I only have one cat. You have 3 cats, but you consider yourself not a cat lady.
Well, I think we have to define what cat lady is, because I think there's that whole thing of like, cat lady's the weird sort of witchy woman who lives in the house, and all you see are the cats in the window, and she's always sort of like having a GoFundMe to raise funds to to get cat litter and food. So I think there's a line we have to define here. Like, are we talking about the extreme cat lady, or just like? Because I love cats. I mean, they sort of wrangle me because I need order, and they like to be fed, and they can count and tell time and things that keep me sort of on track. So
they can count and tell time. You mean because of mealtime?
Yes, but also like if I give Fiona like one less treat than normal, she will look at me like. Where's the other one?
Oh, nice. So you have a really smart cat.
Yes.
Okay. So you consider cat ladies to be witchy women. Mm-hmm. So the fact that I call myself a cat lady conveys to you that I'm this creepy lady.
No, not really.
Standing in the window in like the shadows, overlooking Littleton Main Street.
No, I sort of like I was explaining the extreme.
Okay.
The extreme of that.
Okay.
So like I had a therapist when I got my 3 cats, and I said I have 3 cats. Am I becoming a cat lady? And she said, you'll just have to try harder than that. So,
yeah.
So I don't really think I'm a cat lady to that degree. I like cats though. I think their personality, I think, is, I mean, they're independent, but they're really not. Like, they're very dependent and they're very clingy sometimes.
Yeah.
But they like to be aloof, and I think that mirrors back a personality that I'm familiar with. So,
yes. So whenever you find someone that has exclusively cats, you can already get a sense of possibly what they're like.
Right.
We're at the top of the hour, so I want to just pause in our conversation for a second. You guys are tuning in to WZNC LP Bethlehem. This is North Country Community Radio 99.9 FM, and we stream online at nococommunityradio.org. You are tuned in to North of Normal with me, Amanda McKeen, and today we have Adhi Two Owls on as our guest. And I'm so excited about today's episode. Adhi and I were already chatting it up for the past 20 minutes, and I was just thinking, wow, all of this needs to be on air. So hopefully we'll continue that spirit of things. And Adhi, I don't want to put titles or roles in your introduction. I'd rather our listeners get a sense of who you are from the stories that you share today. Mm-hmm. So just first and foremost, thank you for being here, and thank you for saying yes.
Well, thank you, Amanda, for asking me. This is very exciting.
It is exciting. And you told me that you are no stranger to radio.
Yeah, I've been on a few podcasts.
Okay.
And I've done some interviews, and people have asked me questions, and I love just telling my story, because I think it's important for us to share stories about who we are in a real way.
Yeah.
Because if not, we get into this place of abstraction and judgment and weird things that just aren't really about our humanness. And
yeah.
So
that's exactly why I have my show. So
how exciting.
It sounds like you're in the right place.
Yes.
So Adhi, I like to start out in the beginning with explaining how I know my guests. And you and I were talking before we went on air of like, how are we going to explain this? So I'm going to try my best. Okay. But one of the things that you had mentioned when we were trying to wrap our heads around this was that it was a bit awkward. So Yes, let's start with that it was awkward how we met. I was living in an apartment on Cottage Street and working for an employer here in Littleton, and was in the middle of transitioning out of that role of employment and looking for a new place to live. And you came to check out my apartment.
Yes, and there's a story to get me to that moment, because it didn't just happen. Because I wasn't living in New Hampshire, I was down in Connecticut. I had been traveling for 3 years across the country before COVID. Moved back to Connecticut and was going to settle there, and it just didn't work out because of COVID, and there was no place to rent, everything. And I found myself eventually just living in my car. So there I was in a Honda Fit, and everything is closed, and I'm just like, well, this is a version of hell, isn't it?
Yeah, because you also had a cat.
I did. My ex was actually taking care of my cat.
Okay.
So, yes.
So just you in the car.
Yes, it was just me in the car.
Okay.
And my friends Josh and Isaac, who own Deep Earth Arts, had just started their business, and they were doing an online business because in-person business was just not happening.
Yep.
So they asked me to bring some drums and stuff up because that's some of the artwork that I make. And I said, sure. So I came up and I walked in, and Isaac asked me how I was doing. And I sort of said, I'm in the middle of this kind of weird chaos and living in my car. And they said, well, I think the apartment above us is for rent. You should ask Kevin, who I know from other places. And so I did, and I came up, and that's how I got to look at your apartment. And what's really weird about this is I had been envisioning the place I wanted to live. And it was a big space that was my studio to work in, and then an apartment attached to it. And the craziest thing about this is I walked into that apartment, and I was like, oh, my God. This is exactly what I envisioned.
Yeah.
But I'll be honest, I had no income. I had nothing. like everything was just I don't know how to make this work.
Yeah.
But in my head, I just sort of say yes, because somehow this is exactly what you envisioned. You have to trust the process.
Nice.
So that's what I did. I just sort of said, I don't know how this is going to happen. But there I was. I just trusted. And I didn't exactly move in right away.
No, because I was still there trying to find a place.
I know. I mean, there was awkwardness.
Yes.
But I managed to move up to a small apartment across the driveway, and that's where I spent the winter.
Okay.
And brought my cat up, Fiona. But yeah, so we sort of, I think we never really formally met. We were just sort of passing. Some of my mail was getting delivered to the apartment.
Yes.
It was just weird.
We were both in this weird twilight zone of transition, and we were just unsure of the timing, right? So you were waiting to live there. I was like, where am I going to live?
Right.
So I think that's why it was so awkward. And, I never had any bad vibes from you or towards you. It was just I remember feeling pressure. She's waiting to move in.
Yeah.
I need to find a place to be. So, but you said you met William Wallace.
Right. So the day I showed up to look at your apartment and go, I would be an idiot to say no to this. This fluffy creature comes rambling out into the studio space, which is now what I and he was just friendly and yes, I was just okay, so cats can live here.
Cats can live there. That's perfect. So you got to see imagine Fiona living there, right?
Yes.
And at the time, William Wallace was 18 pounds, and now he's more like 10.
Oh wow, he's svelte.
He's fit now. I made him that way. But yeah, I am just so glad that, I remember after finally moving on, getting a place, making it my own, which is on Main Street. I remember seeing you often walking to the post office maybe and back.
Yeah.
And I always saw you for the last few years, and I'm like, that's the woman that took my apartment.
It's a little dramatic.
Yes.
It's a little dark.
But it seriously wasn't any like negative feelings. It was just like, oh, that's her. She's still here. And so over time, I think it was like last year's art show.
Yes.
I saw you had a booth. And I was like, hey, I'm going to go talk to her. And so we reconnected then, and it was like, you know, finally putting new meaning towards each other's faces.
Right.
And connecting in a new way, which I think was so cool.
Yeah, I think so too.
Yeah, I got to see your art, which was fantastic and very, very unique. And I still would love to come to your studio sometime.
Absolutely.
I just didn't know how to make that happen.
Well, you know, just text me, say, hey, I want to come up and see work.
Yeah.
And if I'm there, I'm open to all of that right now.
Yeah. So having new meaning a year ago, and then it was this summer. What was the event?
It was one of the first Fridays.
It was the final first Friday of the summer that I saw you. And I had thought of you when I started my radio show, and I was like, she would be a cool person to have on here. I don't know her story, but I bet she's got one. And so then we crossed paths on First Friday, and it was like the moment was supposed to happen. And you had some things that had happened this year for you, and just were in a place. And I asked you then, will you come on my show? And you immediately said yes. And I was like, okay, this is good. Yeah. So you have some deep stories that I would love to hear. Like you mentioned living in your car and how you got up here, but let's back up even more from that. Like, where did things start for you?
Well, I have to say, like, my life has been a series of weighing risk with outcome. So, and for me, I mean, I'll just give you some background. I grew up in Connecticut on the shoreline. Typical garden variety, Catholic, alcoholic, dysfunctional family. Okay. You know, I've got 3 siblings. I have an older brother, a sister, and a younger brother. My father died in 2015, so my mom is still there living in the house I grew up in. So that's kind of, you know, where I grew up. But, you know, the town I grew up in was small. Everybody knew each other, multi-generational, and I don't know, something in me when I was very young sort of said, if this is what life is about, everyone just kind of growing old, doing the same thing, this is not, I'm out of here, right? So art was the theme for me that kind of got me got me through everything. So, you know, I immersed myself in visual arts and got awards and went to the Educational Center for the Arts in New Haven and studied painting and drawing and then got into the Kansas City Art Institute when I was 18, which at that time in the 80s was the best art school for painting.
Was that the hub?
So it was like the best art school you could get into for painting in the 1980s. So that was in Kansas City, Missouri. So that was kind of like my first cultural shock. Was to so like. I think now parents take their kids to university and they show them around and get them all set up. And I was just stuck on a train, put on a train and sent to Kansas City, sight unseen, never been to the campus, never been to Kansas City. Like, wow. Yeah, I just was like I was on my own with like a lot of fear and a lot of like no life skills because growing up in a dysfunctional family, and I just had to flail my way through it. And I did well in some things and really poorly in others. But that's kind of like where, but I studied there, and I actually lived in the Midwest for about 12 years, I think. And then through a series of poor relationships and bad choices, I ended up back in Connecticut.
You went back home.
I went back home, and there was a lot of work. I had to, like, a lot of recovery work, a lot of, like, I was a 2-pack-a-day smoker. I was just, like, my life was, I knew I was killing myself. I just didn't know how to stop it. Yeah. So I had to do a lot of family of origin stuff and a lot of work, a lot of therapy, a lot of recovery, a lot of 12-step work. Yeah. And, I used to walk the beach every day. I was working as a cashier in a grocery store. And so every day I'd walk, because I didn't have a car. So I would walk the beach to work, and I would cry the entire time as I was walking, and get to work, and I'd work and hold my shit together. Excuse me.
We're going to try really hard.
We're going to try really hard, but I use colorful language from time to time, and I apologize.
We knew it was going to happen. It's okay.
So anyway,
yeah.
So I was trying to hold it together, and then at the end of the day, I'd walk the beach back home, and it was just this profound sense of just trying to understand who I was, because if you understand addiction and things like that, there's a place where you wake up one day and you realize you have no idea who you are or what you're doing or why you're doing it, but you know it's killing you, and you can either ask for help or you can continue down the road of whatever. So I chose to ask for help, and things got better. I moved in. Had a really great apartment in New Haven, Connecticut, where I lived for a while, and had a landscaping business. I was doing one of the first people doing organic landscaping. Did that for a long time, and so I don't know. And then 9/11 happened, and then I ended up moving to North Carolina to study with somebody, and North Carolina was interesting, and that's kind of where. I changed my name, and I began to start working with some indigenous teachers, and so there was a lot of stuff. So I do a lot of geological jumping in my story.
I have too.
Yeah. So yeah. But what I've realized, and we'll get to this, but I realized that it served a purpose, but it also was a disservice in some ways, because it never allowed me to truly seep into myself.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because
there was always an escape valve.
Yeah.
And I always chose the escape valve. So
I understand that.
So I lived in North Carolina, then I moved up to Pennsylvania, and I lived in Pennsylvania for a while, and that was interesting and fun.
Where in Pennsylvania?
I moved up to Salisbury, which is right near the Delaware River, near New Hope. I lived there. I always called it living in the postcard, because it really was the most beautiful, crazy, amazing place. Lots of art. And I lived in Doylestown for a while. And then I was renting a house, like right in the middle of the housing crisis. So, it was an empty space, and the person who was renting to me said, "I just want somebody in the house." So I got a sweet rental deal.
Oh,
it was just,
man.
It was great. But after a year, I get this. I was traveling for work too at that time too. So I was getting ready to do something in October, and I got this letter in the mail saying, "We've sold the property. You need to be out."
Oh,
by the end
no.
But I literally was getting ready to go on the road the next day. So I was I have 4 days, literally 24 hours to find a place to live and get my stuff out of this apartment.
They gave you 4 days?
Well, they gave me 30 days, but I was traveling.
But you were leaving. Okay.
So I had so basically, I found a place to live in Airville, Pennsylvania, which is the middle of Amish country on the Susquehanna River. And I literally moved all of my stuff in there, and then hit the road to teach for 4 weeks, and moved back and came back into November to a house I had never lived in before to kind of spend the winter there. So anyway, I guess you're getting a flavor for how I tend to be I take risks. I'm curious, but I also am adaptable, and I think that's the key of having done all of this is to be adaptable.
Yeah.
So any situation can be thrown at me, and I'm okay, how do we solve this problem?
Yeah.
How do I make this work? So.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
There's a resilience there too, because there's no option to quit.
Yeah.
It's acceptance.
Yeah. And I'm a firm believer that the world is trying to kill me, and I am determined it will not.
Yeah. Okay, I have so many questions. One of the things you mentioned was changing your name. And your name now is Adhi Two Owls. And you probably get this question all the time.
Oh, I do.
But why that name?
So when I began sort of this spiritual journey. So this kind of hooks back into me walking the beach every day, and so I was collecting shells and things like that, and I began to meet. The story, how I met my first teacher in that vein was I was working at the grocery store, and this woman kept coming through my line. She was older. I couldn't really, but anyway. And one day she just kind of handed me an address on a piece of paper, and she said, "Why don't you come to my house? I want you to do some gardening work or some vague thing." And I just sort of said, "Okay, fine, sure," because I'm like, this is weird, but I'll give it a go.
Let's see what's behind this door.
No guts, no glory.
Yes.
So I went to her house, and it was kind of just weird because it wasn't anything spiritual in any sense of the word. I just kind of went there, and she had this stump in her yard. She kept having me move around, and she had a compost pile, and I just did weird things around her yard, garden work, things like that. And then one day, out of the blue, so this has been going on maybe for a couple of months, she said to me, "I want you to make a rawhide rattle and bring it in 2 weeks." And I was just like, rawhide rattle? Like, where do I get rawhide? And she said, I don't know. It's your world. You figure it out.
Wow.
So the only thing I could think of was, I'll go to a big box store and get the biggest dog bone I could find.
Yeah.
And so I did, and I threw it in my bathtub and like wrestled with this material and made this rattle thing, and that became like what I began to do my first healing work in the shamanic traditions that I work with. So, so eventually, that led to meeting other teachers and things, and I ended up going down to North Carolina to study with somebody, and that didn't go well for a lot of reasons that I don't really want to get into, but I was there, so I was trying to make the best of it. And I've been gifted, there's more. It's always complicated. Stories are never easy because there's all these little threads you have to kind of tell to make the story make sense. So while I was still living in Connecticut, I was working at the Rock Garden, which is a bead shop and rock garden. I think they're still there. And I was driving on 95 to Branford, and I was getting off the exit ramp, and I just saw this very large bird on the exit ramp. So it was like 8 o'clock in the morning, rush hour traffic, and I just impulsively pulled the car over, jumped out, scooped it up, put it in the driver's and the passenger seat, got back behind, and I was just shaking. I was like, what? And I realized it was a great horned owl.
Oh.
So I drove to work because it was expired. It wasn't, but it must have just recently happened because it was, so, and my boss was very open-minded. So we brought it in and we did some saging and some smoke and said some prayers and let it, and then that evening I brought it home and laid it out in the floor of my studio in my apartment, and I got to look at this beautiful bird, like it looked like it had just been to sleep, and it was huge, and I just remember just looking at its beautiful feathers and all of that, and then I just kind of got this. It was really weird, like this download of how the owl had expired. And then it said, then I got this, this sense that I was supposed to take the wings and the tail feathers and they were to be made into fans and to be gifted, which I did. And then I took the rest of the bird and wrapped it up with herbs and things and took it out to the Quinnipiac River and left it under a tree. So,
okay.
So that was the first gift of owl that was given to me. So
I'm trying to. You're probably looking at my face and thinking, "Oh my gosh, what's she going to say?" I'm just trying to process this story. It is like no other story I've heard before.
What?
I don't know if this is a usual story in your circle.
Well, I have to like if you ask me my name, I have to tell you where it all comes from.
Yes, so absolutely.
So it's not like I just woke up one morning and said, I'm going to be Adhi Two Owls. There's a process involved.
Yeah.
So
that was the first owl.
Right.
All right.
So then fast forward, 9/11, I'm getting ready to move down to North Carolina because I just want to be out of the Northeast. I'm feeling unsafe in a lot of ways and just feeling like there's a, escape hatch.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm driving now with the last load to move into this space where I'm going to be studying with this teacher for, I don't know. So it's the last load of stuff, and I'm driving down through Virginia, down 81, and I see this wing flap, and I'm like, that's another owl. I should go back.
You knew right away?
Yeah. I said, I need to go back and get that. So I made a big U-turn and came back around, and it was another great horned owl.
On the side of the interstate?
Yes. So I picked that up, and I said, okay. So in the traditions that I was working with, owl has a lot of intense meaning, okay? For some, it means death. So for some, it's transformation. But what I knew it to mean, and what was hitting me hardest, was that it meant discernment and clarity, seeing through the dark, seeing through the delusion.
Yeah.
So for me, the second one was sort of confirmation that I need to kind of like get it together and figure out what this is about, and kind of claim it as something for me to explore about myself. And a lot of my work in North Carolina was doing really super deep shadow work. So if recovery had been the first part, this part was actually doing the really deep, like getting into the mechanics of why, like, I was struggling with a lot of the stuff I was struggling with. So North Carolina had a lot of good aspects about it, and also a lot of terrible aspects about it. I was absolutely, totally blown away by the racism and just some of the stuff that was like, and it shocked me. I was like, cultural shock. I was just like, wow.
Yeah.
Like, I was not expecting that at all. This is 2002, 2005, I was down there. So,
okay.
To give you a reference point. So, but I stayed there, and then I met an indigenous elder who I'll call Grandma BJ, who I worked with for a little bit. But then I just felt like I needed to get out of the South. I needed to come back north. And this is also part of the name change story. So I was starting to do lectures and talking about stuff. And so I was at a New Agey fair, for lack of a better term, and I gave a talk. And I was just finished the talk, but you know, like in August, like when a thunderstorm is building all day, like it was that kind of a day.
Yeah.
So you could just feel that weight and the heaviness of the storm coming in. And I had just gotten everything into my truck at that time. And just as I was pulling out, like the skies just opened up, and it was just like torrential rain.
Yeah.
Torrential. And I'm driving through this, and I get about 12 miles from home, and I'm coming around a slow blind curve, so it's about 8:30 at night, and I realize the car that's coming at me without its lights on is in my lane.
Oh. And
I swerved, and my truck went into skid, and I went down the side of a mountain, and my truck turned into a tinfoil ball, but I walked away without a scratch.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, it was the craziest thing. But that's kind of, I think, when I really became my name and the person that it was to become. Because I really went down the mountain one person and came up another. And I think, part of initiation, if we want to call it that, is we have to confront our own mortality.
Yes.
And in that moment when the truck went into skid, I basically said, I don't want to die. Like, I want to live. Not in a it wasn't like I said that, but
yeah, it was the energy from your body.
Like there was part of me that was there was nothing I could do. I completely surrendered, but I also knew I didn't want this to be the end.
Yeah.
So, but prior to that, I had a ceremony to change my name to Two Owls with my teacher, and Adhi comes from, I'm dyslexic, so I study a lot of Buddhism. So there's a term in Buddhism called Abhi, A-B-H-I, which means clear and light. But when I first read it, I saw Adhi, and I thought, well, Adhi, I like that. Adhi Two Owls. So that kind of all fit together.
I love that.
But when I did the ceremony, it was a beautiful ceremony, but I never felt it, like I didn't feel different.
Yeah.
So it was after I had the accident that I actually felt like I became that person.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how the name thing
happened.
And then I changed it legally in November of that year. So
yeah, that is quite a moment and experience that you had. I'm just trying to like wrap my mind around what it felt like for you to actually, when the vehicle stopped rolling, what was that moment like?
It was crazy because I was awake and conscious the entire time. It was really weird because the whole thing was silent until the first impact, and then began to make noise. Yeah. And then when it finally stopped, the first thing I did was I touched myself because I wanted to know I was still there. I was still solid. And then I realized I wasn't hurt. And I said, well, that's crazy. Yeah. And then I wasn't really quite sure where I was, but I had landed in the back field of somebody's yard. And they had seen, I guess they had heard it or whatever. So I was shouting because I was it had landed on the passenger side and I was up here. So I was just like...
Okay. So you're suspended?
Right.
By your seatbelt?
Right, by my seatbelt. Yeah. Unhurt, and... So they came, and the emergency people came, but everyone was kind of like, is there anyone else in the car? And I wouldn't find out until later, but I was number 6 of 5 people who had gone off that side of the road and didn't survive or were severely hurt. And the fact that I walked up to the road shocked everybody. Like it was just I met the EMTs later at another event, and they were like, we still talk about that because we just were shocked that you walked away from that. Yeah. So, so I just think, I don't know, I think it makes you very present. Yeah. Okay. And but it also, there's this whole mind thing that happens when and it's hard to describe, but it's sort of like you're suddenly awake in a way that other people aren't. So you start looking around and you start realizing, how do I use this? How do I figure this out? How do I integrate this in other people? How do I make, there's just a lot of confusion and a lot of you feel also you're operating at this wavelength and everyone else is here, and that's not a negative, they're bad or you're good. You're just not, the frequencies are not meshing, and you're not quite sure how to communicate this experience. And there's and I did some research with this around people who survive plane accidents and things like that. And there's a mindset where you're just you feel different, and there's a cognizant kind of way that you're not quite sure how it all fits together. I don't necessarily think it's survivor's guilt so much for me, but it was definitely I just had a very different way of looking at the world, and I couldn't understand how to make it fit for a while. Yeah. So
I recently was reflecting on moments in time that we give meaning, and how even as time goes on, things get new meaning. So this incident for you probably had specific meaning in that moment, but it probably means so much more at this point.
Well, I think for me, it gave me there's before the accident and after the accident. I mean, I can't say things got better after the accident because that's not true. It just became more complex because I had a very different perspective on life, and so my understanding of things as they unfold. I mean, it's still happening now. I mean, I have a very different way of looking at the world, and I always have. And I'm a person who I want to understand. I don't just want to take things because somebody tells me that or whatever. I mean, which can be frustrating for a lot of people because I'm just curious.
Did you see a shift in your art?
Oh yeah.
What did you notice?
So there's a couple things in my art that I have to explain. So there's the sort of sacred objects that I make. So there's rattles and drums, but there's other things. Yeah. Okay. And then there's my drawing and painting, which for me during that time I wasn't doing much of, but I began to pick up drawing as a practice. because I felt like drawing was this language that I could utilize that could tell the story without it, without being misidentified, miscommunicated through words and just my thinking. So for me, like art is a great practice, but drawing is like the seed practice. Like when you draw, there's a communication that happens between you and the empty page. You make a line, and then you respond to that line. You make a shape, you respond to that shape. You use a color, etc. And this conversation unfolds like pulling like a ball of yarn, and you're pulling that string, so that you pull that conversation out.
Yeah.
And to me, drawing is that magic. So I felt like during that time, drawing became more of a practice. Like doing my practice is to sit and draw.
Mm-hmm.
And I teach that to my students. I'd say, draw every day. And I don't care what you draw. Just draw every day. Don't try to interpret. Just draw every day. And then see what comes up. See what happens. When I do a lot of my journey work in the shamanic practices that I teach, I tell them to draw. Like when they come out, don't write, draw. Put your pen to the paper and don't pick it up until you're done. Because when you do that, you're still in that state of the elevated frontal cortex and dreaming and all of that. And the extension of making art is just like that. Drawing is the next step out of that, which is why we see a lot of those, drawings from drawing a blank for the Aboriginal people from Australia. We use that as an example with all the dots.
Okay.
We see these drawings that come out of these spiritual experiences and these experiences of awareness, like sort of hyper awareness, extended awareness, exotic awareness, whatever we want to call it. So I don't know if
Yeah. I mean, now I want to look at all your drawings, especially the befores and the afters.
I could probably.
Have you ever put on a show, like an art show of your stuff? A display of the before and after?
I want to. Right now I've been doing some shows. I've been getting into some galleries here in New Hampshire. I'm right now. I have a piece in the Biennial down in Portsmouth, but I don't think I've had a voice in a way that I wanted to show people.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of being here in New Hampshire. I think that's I feel like that's part of my work here. Because the opportunities to show, and also I've been developing these different series. So one of the series I'm working on right now is in every drop of water there is a universe. So the idea that water is the matrix for everything we see here, and without it we wouldn't be here. Nothing would be here. And there's no guarantee if we roll back time and we send it forward again that we're going to get the same thing over and over again. I think that's Stephen Jay Gould wrote that in his book, It's a Wonderful Life, and it's about the Cambrian explosion. So for me, every drop of water has this potential. I mean, and maybe some of you remember those science experiments we did in junior high school where we got a bunch of grass and stuck it in a jar of clear water, and then we went back a week later and said it had paramecium and amoebas in it. We couldn't figure out why. So I just think and water is very important right now, and and if we don't have it and we aren't good stewards of it, etc. So the series comes out of all of that, and they're round. On round handmade paper, and because that is indicative of cycles and series and just movement in the drop of water itself. So that's kind of one of the series I'm working on right now.
Where can people see your work? Do you have pictures on your website at least?
I do. I have stuff. You can go to my website. I also have stuff at Wren. I have stuff, like I said, the Biennial that's happening down in Portsmouth.
Okay.
If you want to see some of my other, like my books and my other things, I have stuff at the League Gallery here in town.
Okay.
So, yeah.
That's good to know.
Yeah.
And what is your website for everyone listening?
AdhiZen.com, AdhiZen.com.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I'll have to check that out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's nice to know the story behind the art. That always gives it more meaning to me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
We just had the art show, the big art show here in Littleton, and I walked by a lot of people's stories, but I didn't know them.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't feel anything.
Well, and I think like art, there's a lot going on in the art world right now, but I think it's unfortunate that art always is the thing that people say, oh, it's not the most important thing. We need to focus on this, this, and this. And what we forget is that one of the things that humans do is we make art. It's part of our language. It defines who we are. So my random day job that I do is that I teach art history remotely for SUNY. 65,000 years of human art, probably older than that. But one of the things that art tells us is that it talks about it's our human story.
Yeah.
And we've been doing it all over the world, all the time. And it's just part of who we are. But I think like now we're in a place where art is, kind of divisive, and it's part of this kind of investment stuff. And, there's a lot of dead artists like Picasso, etc., who we're still spending billions of dollars, millions of dollars or whatever on their artwork. But there's so many really amazing, talented artists right now who are just not seen because they're just not part of that investment world. And art shouldn't be about investment. It should be about telling our stories.
Yeah.
And we should be able to, yeah. I don't know. I think that's all I have to say.
What platforms are being created so that more artists can be known?
Well, I think as an artist and someone who's been doing this for a long time, you have to constantly be reinventing yourself and be willing to be adaptable. I mean, when I started 30 years ago, it was all cold calls. You picked up the phone, you called space
really?
out of the blue. Yes, and you made an appointment to go bring your stuff to a space.
Wow.
And you would go there and you would set all your stuff up, which might take an afternoon, and someone would come in and say, okay, we'll take this, this, and this, or they'd go, this isn't going to work, and then you'd be sent out.
Man.
So, but the advent of technology has been really great for artists.
Yeah.
And for a while it was really good with social media and stuff, but now it's gotten weird again. And, so I think artists need to, be technically, have some savvy with technology. They have to have a website. I mean, they have to be willing to do all the footwork to be seen, taking risks, asking questions, asking for help, but also finding the time, because I also think it's all about time management. I go into the studio and I work 6 to 12 hours when I'm in the studio, so it's a job. I take it seriously. I go in and I work. If I don't do the work and I don't produce the work, and then I don't figure out the ways to get my work out there, it doesn't happen.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's a job like anything else. So you have to take it seriously like a job.
Yeah.
And a lot of people won't do that. So.
Yeah. I think this is kind of on the same lines. I brought in this mini Buddha board, and it's something I didn't know existed until last night. So I thought it was appropriate to have for our talk today. And I went to yoga at Dust Off Yoga here in town and got this board. And what it is you have a little paintbrush with it, and you just dip your brush in water and you paint with water. And it eventually evaporates, and then the board is blank again. So you watch this. Initially, you feel the brush strokes, you see that respond to the water. It's really very satisfying. But as you're going, things start to fade.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's this initial feeling of panic, like you need to go back and retrace it because it's disappearing. But that's what it's supposed to do.
Mm-hmm.
So I would love to hear your perspective as an artist who leaves your mark on things, mm-hmm. of what place does a Buddha board have in the art world?
Well,
if it's disappearing art.
Well, I think there's this conflict. Impermanence is life. Impermanence, everything is, and everything is changing. Nothing remains the same. Nothing is designed to live forever because of the world we live in. That's the duration of the physics of the mechanics of the world we live around. So as an artist, we want to leave our mark. We want to communicate something. We want to have relevance. So the trick is to find relevance in impermanence, and that's never ever that's never an easy sell. But if you think about sand paintings that the Tibetan Buddhists do, and they spend a week doing these beautiful, elaborate designs with tiny bits of colored sand, and and they're beautiful and amazing and magical, and then they have this entire ceremony of just destroying it, and then they sweep it all up into this pile, and they'll put it in an urn, and then they'll go out to a body of water, and they'll pour this sand in. So those prayers get carried out into the water and bless everything, So if we think of impermanence and we think of the disappearing line on the Buddha board, it's that releasing of that energy into the world. It makes this magical transformation, So, the paper I do the drawings on, that is a history. So Thich Nhat Hanh talks about, can you see the cloud in the paper? So what does he mean by that? Well, there was a seed that grew into a tree, and the tree absorbed the sun and did photosynthesis so it could be fed, but the rain came from the clouds that also fed the tree, and eventually the tree became the paper, and then the paper is presented to me, and then I do the drawings on that, and eventually that paper will disintegrate over time, and it will still exist because it'll be absorbed into something else. Mm-hmm. So it lives on forever. But we're stuck in the linear concept of I'm here in this finite line of my life. So everything has to be within the framework of that, the guardrails of that. But if we let go of those guardrails, everything we do lives forever. Everything we do goes on forever. Nothing in this universe is destroyed. It just becomes something else. So there's that notion that even if we make a mark, so I'll go ahead and make a mark on the Buddha. So, if we make some, and of course it's just going to, so we have this circle, and it's going to slowly fade. But but then it's water. Okay, so we can even go down this road of it's water. So it's evaporating. It's evaporating up into the atmosphere. And eventually these droplets are going to end up somewhere out there watering a tree somewhere. Yeah. So the expansiveness of our just understanding of who we are in time and space. And I'm probably getting all woo-woo.
Oh, no, I love it. Keep going.
But to me, that's what gets excited. I get excited about like when I'm making art and I'm thinking about these ideas. I get excited about the hugeness of it.
Yeah.
So when and a good example of this is when I was before COVID, and I was driving around and I was going across the country, and I would be out in, let's say, Utah, and I would stop the car in the middle of nowhere and turn off the car, and I'd just get out of the car. And I wouldn't hear an airplane. I wouldn't hear anything. It was just the vast silence of this vast space, And I would just be in, and I would just say, "It's so big here, so big here," And eventually you'd start hearing some sounds, and things would come in. And then there was a time I was down in Organ Pipe in Arizona, which is this national park, which is it's called organ pipe because of there's a particular kind of cactus that kind of grows up with multiple branches and looks like an organ, so that's where the name comes from. And I was there, and I was camping in this really remote area, and I remember at night it got really dark and the stars came out, and because there's no light pollution or anything, there were so many stars, but it also felt like I was in the stars. Like that's like how three-dimensional the sky was. Like it wasn't up there, it was like it was here.
Yeah.
And to me that was like having that experience, amongst many other experiences, just like helped me understand that, like, even though I am this one tiny person, I'm just me, like mucking around sorting out my stuff.
Well, that was a close one.
I caught myself. that it's part of a much bigger continuum, and some people choose to call that God, or the divine, or the great is, or whatever. But I think just that understanding that I'm part of something, this greater thing that continues, and I'm just doing my thing, making my lines that evaporate, and just like showing up every day, and sometimes not even really being sure, just kind of saying, well, I'll just kind of see what the day brings.
Yeah.
And not being like, driven by agenda or other things. But yeah, it's, I think there's so much magic in the world, if I can use that word, and people don't see it. And I know a lot of that has to do with we just have the mechanics of our lives, because we still have to pay rent and we still have to do all the things that make life happen.
Yeah.
And we live in a world where it's much more complicated now than it's ever been. And I really feel for the generations, like the teenagers, the 20-year-olds, the 30-year-olds right now, who are like really, like, the world right now is really challenging for them.
Yeah.
On so many levels. But if we can somehow realize that, let me, how do I want to say it? Okay. There's a term oneness, and everyone sort of throws that around like some kind of magical abracadabra thing. Oh, if we're just one, or if we're just love, or if we're just kind. But what does that mean? Like, we say this in a very abstract way, but we don't have any sort of, like, mechanism to really understand what that means, right? So if we break it down into oneness is accepting the fact that I'm part of a much greater whole. And even though I can be an individual within that, I still have to participate, okay? And if I participate, then it lifts my life, but it also lifts everybody else's life, right? So,
yeah.
And if I don't want to do that, then I have to agree to not be part of that and go off and do my thing, whatever that is. But if I want to participate in this greater thing, then that's the exchange, that's the engagement. I think it was the TED Talk. Jim Holtz, I think that's who it was. And he was talking about, like, why does the universe exist, which is, its own sort of philosophical black hole.
Yes.
of funness. But he was talking about, like, how we don't really live in an elegant universe or a perfect universe, but we live in this kind of mediocre universe, and we want to make the bad bits smaller and the good bits bigger, because that gives us meaning. And I think that's important, is that if we focus on things really simply in that sense, that's really what we're here to do. Is make the bad bits smaller and the good stuff bigger. And that not only gives us meaning and purpose, but it's a way of guiding us forward to just no single person is going to solve all the problems in the world, or even all the big problems in the world. It's a we thing. It's a cooperation thing, a collaboration thing, a communication thing. So anyway.
So anyway is how she ends that.
That's my story. I'm sticking to it.
Adhi, that was so beautiful. I'm going to go back and listen to that, and I'll probably have some great thoughts as a result. We're coming up on an hour here, so I want to be cognizant of time.
That went so fast.
It did go fast. We have a couple minutes left. I know that you've experienced loss this year, and you had told me before this hour that you were comfortable talking about it. Not to put pressure on you, but we have a couple minutes, and I would love for you to share what you're learning through loss.
Yeah. Grieving is such a strange process. So grief, there's two things about grief that I think are important to understand. You love something and you miss it. That's one part of grief, And then there's this other part of grief where you want to keep it alive because their story is important, and I think that's what makes it hard, because the stories bring up emotion. And but I also know my partner, who died in May, would not want me to not live my life fully. So being in that state of feeling loss and grief and making that real, because that's real, but also living because that also keeps their story alive. And all the things I'm doing now, there's part of me in the back of my mind, she's somewhere out there because of our whole oneness conversation.
Yeah.
and she's participating in this other way, and also for me, having moved up here, and it was a long distance relationship, I never felt fully here because I always felt like there had to be choices made for the relationship to move at some point in a direction. So suddenly that's not on the table anymore. So I'm fully here. And there's a gift in that, which has allowed me to move my art and my work and my life further along. So, but I think loss is an important part of living. We live in a world of these dualities. Things die so other things can live. It's a cycle. And not being afraid of it I think is really an important aspect of it. We don't talk about it enough. We don't relate to it well. We tend to shy away from it. We have really bad practices, I think, in grieving and allowing people to grieve. So on that level, I think we could do better. Humanity could just do better with that. Yeah. So.
Well, I'm so glad you're fully here. I'm not happy you experienced loss, but I'm happy that you've found meaning through it, and that you've been able to find presence and gratitude.
Yeah.
That's really good.
Thank you. And I'm really glad I'm here. I mean, it was never on my radar to be here in New Hampshire. Literally not on my radar at all. So the fact that I'm here is to me a mystery, and I like mysteries, and I'm curious.
Yeah, you do.
So I continue to explore the mystery,
Yeah.
So,
what's behind the next door? Can't wait. I like your spirit, Adhi.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, thank you again for being here. The things that you've shared today are so incredibly deep.
Thank you.
It's not like, what's your favorite food? What's your favorite color? It's very, very deep. So for those who chose to listen today, thank you for sticking with us through some very deep conversation, and hope that you found it as rewarding as we did.
Thank you, Amanda. I'm really glad I came.
Yeah. I hope you'll come back again.
Absolutely.
I think you probably have more stories to share.
We do. Maybe we could do favorite color and favorite. We'll do a light and fluffy version.
No light and fluffy. Maybe we'll talk more about cats next time.
Okay,
but we did talk a little bit today, so I'm happy about that.
Me too.
All right. Thank you, Adhi. And listeners, thank you for being here with us. Hope you have a fantastic day.